Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, in today's episode, we are doing a comparison video, and we are going to take a look at Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, Fallout, and Skyrim, and compare those across 7 different categories. And those 7 categories are 1. Ease of learning / the rulebook. 2. Setting up / taking down. 3. The sense of adventure and exploration. 4. Conflict and combat. 5. How good is just the base game and are the expansions necessary? 6. Table presence. And 7 is my personal rankings of all 3 of these games. Now, personally, I like all 3 of these games a lot. I think all 3 of these games are fantastic adventure games, and I am so happy to own all 3 and have them all in my collection. And these are probably games that I will never get rid of. These are good games. Now, why have I chosen these 3 games to compare? I think these 3 games have quite a bit in common. All 3 of them are kind of big, epic, overland adventure games, kind of on a large scale. And all 3 of them have a similar mechanism in which you are working with a large deck of cards, numbered from like 1 to 500, 600, 700 in some cases. And each time you play a game, you are working with a subset of this large library of cards. And that subset of cards will dictate the kinds of quests you are going on and the kinds of the kinds of challenges that will come up and the kinds of conflicts that you will have. And those cards are used, the subset of cards will create a sub-library. And that sub-library gets created based upon choices you've made, based upon different rolls of the dice that you've had during the game. And so that smaller subset library of cards is kind of constantly evolving while you are playing. And all 3 of these games utilize that kind of mechanism and those components. So I think that these 3 games lend themselves well to being compared. So let's take a look now at number 1. The first topic is ease of learning and the rulebook. Coming in 3rd place definitely is Skyrim. The rulebook is legendarily terrible. It is a very difficult game to learn. You have to read the rulebook and then possibly go through the tutorial, but I think the tutorial is pretty bad as well because it really just teaches you how to play that tutorial. And then when you go to play the rest of the game, you're kind of lost. So you have to read the rulebook, kind of stumble your way through the tutorial, then start playing. And then if you're like me and a lot of other people, you spend a lot of time on BGG or maybe in the Skyrim Facebook group or watching hours of how to play YouTube videos. You'll finally get the game down. And once you do, it plays pretty quickly and pretty easily, but it is a real uphill battle to learn. Coming in at number 2 for this topic is Fallout. And Fallout and Arkham Horror are pretty close, but something really elevates Arkham Horror in my estimation. So Fallout is number 2 here. And Fallout is a pretty good rulebook. Fantasy Flight, I think for the most part, makes good rulebooks. They're easy to learn from the rulebooks. There are always these kinds of, in all of these kinds of games, there are these outlier situations. There are these edge cases where a combination of a certain number of cards comes together and it's like, okay, what the heck do I do with this combination? And because there are so many random elements in these games, it's hard for a designer to think of every single thing that can happen. So there is still things like that in Fallout. But you have that typical kind of modern Fantasy Flight style where you have the how to or the learn to play guide, and then you have the guide that has all of the rules and things in alphabetical order. And I think that's a really good solution to learning board games and to teaching board games. But coming in at number 1 is Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. And this is mainly because of that deluxe rulebook that was available when the game was new. And it is by far my favorite rulebook of all time. I love the deluxe rulebook for Arkham Horror. I wish more games that I liked came with or had the option to buy a deluxe rulebook. It's hardbound. It has an interview with Richard Launius about the genesis, the creation of the game. It has all of your rules, how to play. Then it has all of the rules in alphabetical order, like those two Fantasy Flight rule books stacked together. And then it ends up with a whole bunch of little short stories and lore snippets and things to learn about the world. It's just a fantastic rulebook. I know that's a little unfair because if you were to buy the game today, you wouldn't have the opportunity to get that deluxe rulebook, but I'm kind of looking at these games in the way that I have them now. And when I bought Arkham Horror, I was able to get that deluxe rulebook, and it was for free just for pre-ordering the game from my local GameStop, or GameStop, Game Shop, I should say. But yeah, so that is the ease of learning. Number 1, Arkham Horror 3rd edition. Number 2, Fallout. And in a distant third, last place is Skyrim. Okay, so coming up on number 2, the second topic that we'll compare is setting up and taking down. And in a distant third is Arkham Horror 3rd edition. I hate setting Arkham Horror 3rd edition up. There are just too many things that you have to set up. The tiles that you create Arkham with, that you create your Arkham map, I think are really bad. And one of the reasons why is because they are double-sided. So that's not too bad. I don't really like double-sided tiles because you kind of have to always flip over to make sure that the thing on the other side isn't needed. But it's even worse in Arkham Horror 3rd edition because you might have 2 different tiles that have the same location on one side, but different locations on the other side. So you might have, I don't know, maybe Kingsport on one side and Kingsport on another tile. But then this tile has the downtown on the other side. And this tile has, I don't know, the east side on one tile. So you might grab this Kingsport, but later on in the setup, you realize that you actually need this Kingsport because you need what's on the other side. It's super confusing. I hate it. I dislike making the subset cards of the enemies. You have to go through and look for these enemy keywords to make your subset of enemy cards, and that takes way too long. There's a lot of setup in Arkham Horror 3rd edition, and because of that, there's also a lot of takedown. So even though I love the game, that is a good example of a game where the setup does prevent me from playing as often as I would like. So coming in at number 2, I think is Skyrim. And these, again, Skyrim and Fallout will be number 1. Those are very similar. Skyrim is actually pretty easy to set up and to put away. It has a pretty good save system, and you can pretty quickly have the game set up. I think in my super long, detailed hour and a half long, I can't remember how long it was, but in my detailed review of Skyrim, I said that I timed myself from it being completely boxed up, and it only took about 15 minutes to set up. For a big epic game, that's pretty good, and it does, you can put it away pretty quickly. And Fallout, I think Fallout is a real breeze to set up as well, especially if you're playing with the expansions where you just kind of use all of the tiles. And you just have that one kind of large stack of cards. You have a few stacks of chits that you have to lay out for the enemies. And you can be playing a game of Fallout very, very quickly. And it all stores and all packs away pretty quickly and nicely. So setup and takedown at number 1, we have Fallout. Number 2, Skyrim. And in a distant third, we have Arkham Horror 3rd edition. Okay, so coming in, point number 3 is the sense of adventure and exploration. You know, when you sit down to play one of these games and you're in that starting location, how do you feel about the exploration? Do you feel like you are really exploring this world and unveiling its secrets and diving into its intricacies? And at number 3, I'm putting Arkham Horror 3rd edition. I don't really feel like I am exploring Arkham City in that game. I don't really feel like that in Arkham 2nd edition either. The exploration is a little different than in the other games. And in that sense, I just don't feel that real grand sense of exploration and adventure. I like what adventures there are, but I just feel that the other 2 handle this topic in a more, I guess, adventurous way. And so coming in at number 2 would be Fallout. I love starting from that initial tile and exploring, moving out, revealing things, and you're revealing those hexes one at a time. The creatures come out, you will discover vaults and side quests as you are exploring. The world kind of opens up organically, and it does really feel like you are living in this world while you are playing Fallout. And number one, I was really surprised by how good Skyrim captures the feel of the video game. I think the open-ended kind of sandbox nature of the Skyrim adventure board game is pretty fantastic. I love how the more you engage with the side quests, the more time you have. And I love the way that the threat management works in that game as a timer, but it encourages the players to engage with the game because the more side quests you have, the more places you have to place that threat. And you need to think about how you're going to solve one quest before another so you don't accidentally fail that quest. Just a really, really fantastic system that encourages a sense of adventure, and I love the exploration in the Skyrim adventure board game. So as far as the sense of adventure and exploration goes, number one, Skyrim, number two, Fallout, and number three, Arkham Horror. Okay, the next topic will be how these games deal with conflict. How do they deal with combat? How do they deal with the player facing off against various types of challenges? Coming in at number 3 and 2, these are very, very close to each other. I could easily swap these. It's hard to kind of tell which one of these I like more, but I'm putting Fallout at number 3, and it's mainly because the combat system is just a little weird. I don't really like the dice that it uses. It's a 6-sided die, but it has these body symbols like in the Pip-Boy from the video game with these different dots, and it's always a little convoluted. And it always takes just a little bit too long to look at the dice and determine, okay, did I hit or not? But conversely, I do like the way that those dice do handle the non-combat challenges. Arkham Horror, I think, does a good job. It's one of my favorite kind of dice resolution systems, a pool of D6, and you're looking for 5s or 6s. It's simple, it's straightforward, it makes sense. When you get that extra boost to your strength, you just add another D6 to that pool. If you are debilitated in some way, you subtract a D6 from your pool. Very simple, very straightforward, elegant. I do like it. I like it quite a bit, actually. It is my favorite kind of dice resolution system. But coming in at number 1 is Skyrim. I think Skyrim has a fantastic conflict resolution system. I like the combat a lot. I like how the different weapons do different damage depending on what kind of armor they are strong against or weak against. I like how you can upgrade your character with the different skills, and the different skills will actually help you with combat and with non-combat encounters and challenges. So just a really good conflict resolution system. So for topic number 4, conflict and combat, number 1 is Skyrim, and then 2 and 3 pretty close together. We have Fallout and or Arkham Horror and Fallout. Okay, so number 5, topic number 5. How good is just the base game / are the expansions necessary? So let's tackle this from that first question, the first part of this question. How good is just the base game? And coming in in last place, in number 3 is Fallout. For me, I guess we'll look at the questions together, because for me, number 3, Fallout, it really does need the expansions, and that's because of the way that I play most of my games, which is solo or cooperatively. I'm not a huge fan of competitive games, especially competitive adventure games, especially in the way that Fallout handled its competitive adventure game. It's kind of a disaster because you can win without even really knowing you're going to win, completely by accident. But with the Atomic Bonds expansion, with the California expansion, they changed a lot of the game. They added cooperative / solo variants to all of the scenarios. And you really do need those expansions to elevate Fallout to its status of being a really good game. And so I do not recommend Fallout without any of the expansions. Coming in at number 2 would be Skyrim. I think the base game of Skyrim is pretty good. It does need some variety from the expansions, but those expansions are so expensive for what you get. They are two of the most expensive expansions I've ever seen in a game. I think one of them is $70, $60, and you don't really get a lot. You only get like a couple hundred cards. Yeah, it's the pricing on Skyrim, and that pricing really comes into conflict with when you think about the expansions, because while the expansions aren't needed, there is a good amount of stuff in that base game. The expansions add that kind of variety that you're looking for. And so you want that variety, but it's really hard to recommend them because they are so expensive. It's so expensive. So I don't think that the expansions are necessary for Skyrim, but you will want them. And because they're so expensive, it can be hard to recommend them. And the base game of Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, I think, is a great base game. You get a handful of scenarios. The scenarios can be played multiple times. I've played that first scenario, the Azathoth scenario, probably 8 or so times by now, and it's always fun. Like I don't mind playing those scenarios multiple times. There is enough variety. There are enough random things that they feel different. And the expansions might kind of actually hurt the game a little bit, especially if you end up getting everything, just because they add to that setup time exponentially. You have more stuff you have to dig through, more tiles, more subset cards of enemies that you have to put together. And so I would look at Arkham Horror 3rd Edition as just the base game and then maybe one of the big box expansions. So I don't think the expansions are a necessity in Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. So in this category, how good is the base game / are the expansions necessary? In first place with Arkham Horror, I think the base game is fantastic and the expansions aren't a necessity. And then there's Skyrim and then there's Fallout, where the expansions are definitely necessary. In topic number 6 here, we have table presence. How good does it look on the table? What's the art like? Do you feel like you are in this world because the art draws you into it? The art on the cards, the art on the tiles, all of that. And so in last place here, a distant third is Skyrim. Skyrim, I think I called it an aggressively ugly game, and I stand by that statement 100%. It is one of the worst looking big box expensive games I've ever seen. The map is incredibly ugly. All of the art on the cards are low quality screenshots, like low res screenshots from the video game. Like I said in my review, Skyrim hasn't looked that bad since it was released back in the day on the Xbox and Xbox One. Skyrim was on the 360. What am I right? Yeah. And the PlayStation 3, I think. Yeah, the graphics that they used for the screenshots are super low quality. You know, they could have gotten some of the screenshots from the way the game looks now with all of the mods, and it looks amazing. The iconography is okay, but there's a lot of wasted space on those cards. A lot of the quest cards have no art whatsoever, and they don't have a lot of text. They might have 1 or 2 words on a whole poker-sized card. Yeah, Skyrim is an aggressively ugly game, and that's one of the main things that makes Skyrim a hard sell for some people. I think coming in at number 2 is Fallout. Fallout does use some images that look like they're from the video game, but they don't look as bad as the ones in Skyrim. But Fallout has a really nice clean feel. It does kind of embrace that Pip-Boy, that kind of Atomic Age feel. I think everything looks really clean. I like the iconography. I like the design of the cards. Everything is very readable. It has a kind of the land, the tiles look really cool, but it's a lot of brown, but that's because of the setting of Fallout being post-apocalyptic and you're in a wasteland. I think, but the cards have nice bright colors to them. Either they are the space on the cards is well used. It's not wasted. It's an efficiently made game, and it is a pleasant one to look at. And I think once you get everything set up on the table, it looks pretty good. But coming in at number 1 for this is, of course, Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. The library of art that Fantasy Flight has created for their Arkham file games is, I think, one of the best libraries of art in any board game or any tabletop game. I think it's up there with some of that old library that TSR had access to. There are so many great images, and yes, they reuse images from one game to the next, but that's okay. I mean, that's what a library of art is for. Art assets are incredibly expensive, and to expect each new game to have a whole new library of art assets is kind of insane. They get a really good use out of this library of art. It looks great. While I'm not a big fan of the hex tiles that are used to make up Arkham, and I wish it just had a normal fold out rectangle board like Eldritch Horror or like Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, once the tiles are set up, the art on the tiles is really good. They did a really great job of depicting the various places around Arkham. It feels like you're in that world. All of the art on the cards is fantastic. The iconography is fantastic. I mean, it just has that quality that I expect from a Fantasy Flight game that I don't always get. So table presence, how does a game look? I give Arkham Horror 3rd Edition first place, followed by Fallout, and then in a distant last place, we have Skyrim. Okay, topic number 7, the final topic today, and that is my rankings. How do I rank these 3 games? And coming in at number 3 is Skyrim. Now remember, I love all 3 of these games. All 3 of these games are a permanent part of my collection. But Skyrim it's a lot of it is the look and the way the cards are used. There's a lot of empty space on the cards. There isn't a lot of flavor text. Skyrim kind of, even though it has a great feel for adventure, it kind of pushes me away in terms of how it handles its flavor text, how it handles its theme. And I think the map is really, really ugly. A lot of times when I think about wanting to play a game, the way it looks on the table is a big part of that. And I think about Skyrim and I just don't get excited to set it up. And a lot of that has to do with the way it looks. And it is a little dry. I wish there was just a little more character to how everything looked and felt in the Skyrim adventure board game. Coming in at number 2 is Fallout. I think Fallout is a game that Fallout is a little bit under the radar. Maybe it is a little underappreciated. And I think that's because it does need those expansions to really shine. And so that is a lot of ask. You know, you're asking somebody to buy the base game, and then you're also asking them to buy 2 expansions. So that can be a pretty big financial investment. And once you combine all those expansions together, you do need to remember how to set it up a little bit. And it does add some complication to the setup and maybe to remembering, oh, wait, which expansion was this one rule in or this one rule change or something like that. But overall, I think Fallout is really fun. I always have a fun time going through that huge library of cards, setting out on those adventures, having those random encounters, and having those random encounters kind of splinter off and break off into different points depending on the decisions that I made or depending on how I succeeded or failed at tests. I always feel like I'm having a really good adventure with Fallout, and it's pretty easy to play. It's pretty easy to pick up and get going. But my favorite game out of these 3 is Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. I think 3rd Edition is great. I like all of the Arkham games except for maybe the living card game. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's way too expensive, and I'm not a fan of deck building in that way. But I love 2nd Edition. I love Eldritch Horror. I like Elder Sign with the expansions, and I really do like Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. Later on in the year, when I do my deep dive into Arkham Horror, we'll talk a little bit more about that. If it wasn't for the setup, I would play Arkham Horror 3rd Edition a heck of a lot more. I wish that game was easier to set up. I got it out just about a month ago, I think. And I was excited to play it, and because I have a newer expansion that I haven't played yet, and some new scenarios and some new things to encounter. And man, it took me so long to get everything organized and set up. And by the time I did, my enthusiasm for the game had started to deflate a little bit. But once I actually started playing the game, I was right back in that pocket and I was having so much fun exploring the world, fighting these creatures and these monsters, being an investigator and wandering the streets of Arkham looking for clues and closing gates and all of that kind of thing. And I ended up having a blast playing through the scenario that I played. And I love the way the game looks. I love all of the items and the spells and how all of that stuff works together. Every time I play a game of any of the Arkham games, but especially 3rd edition and 2nd edition, I end up with these really great little stories that happen on the table because of the way all of the various random elements work together to create these kind of serendipitous and wonderful moments of emergent gameplay story. And so my rankings, number 1, Arkham Horror, 3rd edition, followed by Fallout, and then followed by Skyrim. But I think all 3 of these games are great adventure games, and I love that we live in a time where all of these games are available. And 2 of those are IP games. That just kind of dawned on me. 2 of those, actually all 3 are, right? I mean, we have, back in the day when I was young, if a board game was made based off of a movie or a book or a video game, it was probably going to be bad. But now we have 2 great games based off of a video game. That's fantastic. And then Arkham Horror, of course, based off of a library of books. And I think all 3 of them do their properties justice. And so, hey, the real winner here is us, right? Because we get to experience all 3 of these games. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this comparison video of Arkham Horror 3rd edition, Fallout, and Skyrim. And we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.